March 1, 1944. An unyielding winter morning in Bastogne, Belgium. The air is thick with tension, and the echoes of distant artillery fire punctuate the cold silence. Snowflakes drift lazily, landing on the wretched landscape, a stark contrast to the chaos of war that surrounds it. Within a hastily erected field hospital, Nurse Clara Evans, 28, meticulously arranges her medical supplies. Her hands tremble slightly, a mix of anxiety and determination flickering in her deep brown eyes. Clara is known for her unorthodox methods, often met with skepticism from her peers. "Bandaging a wound like that? Absurd," whispers Lieutenant Markham, a battle-hardened medic, shaking his head as he watches her prepare. Yet Clara's heart beats for the soldiers. Each life lost weighs heavily on her conscience. A photograph of her younger brother, lost in the trenches, lingers in her mind, fueling her resolve. As Clara reaches for the rolls of gauze, a cacophony of gunfire erupts nearby, rattling the fragile walls of the hospital. The urgency of the moment is palpable. She knows the next wave of wounded is imminent. With every second, the numbers climb. What she doesn't know is that this idea would change the war. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and comment below. March 1, 1944. The wintry battlefield of Bastogne, Belgium, is marked by the unrelenting grip of war. The bitter cold is a constant reminder of the suffering endured by both soldiers and medical staff. As the sky looms gray, the distant rumble of artillery is punctuated by the cries of the wounded. In this chaotic environment, a grim reality unfolds. Battle injuries are claiming lives at an unprecedented rate. Statistics tell a harrowing story. During World War II, nearly 70% of soldiers who succumbed to their injuries did so not on the battlefield, but in makeshift hospitals, where inadequate medical interventions failed to save them. The odds stacked against the doctors and nurses were crushing. The medical community was well aware. Infection rates in battlefield wounds were alarmingly high, with gangrene being a common cause of death. Soldiers who survived initial injuries often faced a second enemy, their own bodies. Prior to 1944, military medicine grappled with a problem that seemed insurmountable. Traditional methods of treating wounds involved bandaging techniques that were often inefficient and time-consuming. The reliance on sterile bandages, while crucial, often fell short in the heat of battle. Lieutenant Markham, a surgeon, recalls the frustration. "We had the tools, we had the will, but nothing worked as we hoped. We were losing men to infections faster than we could save them." The reality was stark. The existing protocols for wound treatment were insufficient to address the unique challenges posed by war injuries. The sheer volume of casualties overwhelmed medical personnel, leading to shortcuts that compromised patient care. For every soldier that made it to the field hospital, there were two others left behind, their fate sealed by preventable complications. Experts from both the military and civilian medical sectors reached a consensus of impossibility. Effective treatment in the battlefield was an elusive dream. The methods used were often outdated, stemming from surgical practices that had not evolved to meet the demands of modern warfare. The emphasis on speed often meant that proper care was sacrificed, leading to a cycle of despair among the medical staff. In the context of the desperate conditions of the front lines, an absurdity began to emerge in the minds of those who dared to think differently. Conventional treatments were not enough. There had to be another way. The stakes were high. The estimated number of combat deaths from infected wounds soared into the tens of thousands. What was needed was a breakthrough, not just in technique, but in the very philosophy of battlefield medicine. The winter of 1944 became a catalyst for change, as desperation turned into determination. With enemy lines ever shifting, and the number of injured rising daily, the possibility of innovation flickered in the minds of those in the field. Among them, Clara Evans stood resolutely, determined to challenge the prevailing norms. Her belief in the power of innovative thinking was met with skepticism, but she remained undeterred. As the days dragged on, Clara witnessed firsthand the devastation wrought by neglecting wound care. Soldiers whose lives could have been saved succumbed to infections that might have been controlled with proper bandaging techniques. The question loomed large in her mind. What if there was a different approach? Frustration with the status quo began to manifest in her thoughts. Clara often found herself rehearsing the words of her mentor, "Innovation is born from necessity." In the sterile confines of the field hospital, she envisioned a method that combined speed with efficacy, something that could be executed under the most chaotic conditions. As she pondered, a stark realization hit her. Traditional bandaging techniques focused primarily on the surface, neglecting the importance of deeper tissue care. This revelation ignited a spark within her. She began to sketch out ideas for a new bandage, one that would not only cover the wound, but also facilitate healing while minimizing infection risks. Yet Clara was not the only one wrestling with these ideas. Within the medical community, there were voices of doubt. The echoes of ridicule haunted her. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Unwavering, she grew more resolute, prepared to face the naysayers. In her mind, the image of soldiers lying on the operating tables, fighting for their lives against the invisible enemy of infection, spurred her onward. The odds were daunting, but Clara recognized that the greatest innovations often emerged from the darkest circumstances. What Clara Evans envisioned was not merely a bandage. It was a lifeline, a means to combat the silent killer that stalked the wounded in shadowy field hospitals. Her pulse quickened with the urgency of her mission. This absurd idea, born from desperation and despair, would soon become the beacon of hope for thousands of soldiers. As the winter day faded into night, Clara's determination crystallized. The hospital buzzed with the frantic energy of care, and amidst the chaos, she felt a growing conviction. "If I don't try, who will?" she whispered to herself. What she didn't know was that this idea would change the war. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and comment below. March 2nd, 1944, Bastogne, Belgium. The wind howls through the desolate streets of Bastogne, where the remnants of war cling to every corner. Amidst the chaos, one figure moves with purpose through the crumbling ruins, a nurse named Margaret "Maggie" Thompson. At 27, Maggie is a dedicated and resourceful woman, her warm brown eyes reflecting both compassion and determination. She has served in the medical corps for 2 years, witnessing the ravages of war firsthand. Each day, she fights against not only the enemy, but the very conditions that threaten to undermine her efforts. Inside the makeshift hospital, Maggie tends to a steady stream of wounded soldiers. Bandages are scant, supplies are dwindling, and the cries of the injured reverberate through the drafty hallways. She watches as a young private, barely 18, bleeds profusely from a gunshot wound to the thigh. The other nurses scramble, struggling to stem the flow of blood while Maggie's mind races. "This isn't enough," she mutters under her breath, her voice barely audible above the chaos. "We need something better." As she wraps a bandage around the soldier's leg, a thought flickers in her mind, a possibility that feels as absurd as it is hopeful. It's a method she once learned from an old medical manual, a technique involving a unique way of applying pressure. It had seemed simplistic, even ridiculous, but now it takes root in her mind. What if, she thinks, her heart pounding, what if she could implement this technique, even if it defies conventional wisdom? Across the room, Nurse Helen Wright, a close friend, catches Maggie's eye. "You look pale. You okay?" Maggie forces a smile, but inside, doubt gnaws at her. "I have an idea, but I'm not sure if it'll work." "You always have ideas, Maggie. Most of them are crazy," Helen says, a teasing lilt to her voice. "What is it this time?" "It's about pressure," Maggie replies, her voice lowering. "I think I can create a better bandage, something that applies consistent pressure." Helen raises an eyebrow. "And how do you plan to do that? The brass will never approve of some absurd new method." "Maybe not. But if it saves lives..." Maggie's voice trails off. The weight of the lives lost burdens her. "If we don't try, we'll never know." The days stretch on, and with each passing hour, the urgency mounts. Maggie becomes consumed by her idea, sketching designs during quiet moments and gathering materials whenever she can. She envisions a bandage that creates a seal around wounds, applying sustained pressure that could control bleeding more effectively than conventional methods. "Imagine if we could actually save someone's life with this," she confides to Helen one evening, their breath visible in the cold air of the tent. "We could change everything." But Maggie soon faces skepticism. When she approaches Dr. Mitchell, the commanding officer at the hospital, he listens with folded arms and a skeptical frown etched across his brow. "Maggie, you know the protocols. We can't afford to take risks right now. Lives depend on established methods," he argues. "But doctor, the current methods aren't working. We're losing men who could be saved with just a bit of pressure. I can prove it." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," he retorts sharply. "You're a nurse, not a surgeon. Stick to what you know." Deflated but resolute, Maggie decides to pursue her idea alone. She knows the risks but understands that innovation rarely comes without resistance. Late at night, after her shifts, she quietly gathers supplies: gauze, bandages, and adhesive. She tests her concept on a series of volunteer patients, soldiers willing to risk their lives in more ways than one. As she works in the dim light of the hospital, a sense of mission drives her. The soft rustle of fabric against skin becomes a comforting rhythm, punctuated by the occasional gasp from a soldier feeling the release of pain. "One more time," she whispers to herself, testing her design repeatedly. Days pass, and the system begins to take form. An unexpected ally joins her efforts: Corporal James "Jimmy" Allen, a combat medic who has seen the horrors of the battlefield. He catches wind of Maggie's late-night experiments and approaches her cautiously. "Maggie," he says, his voice low, "I've heard you want to make a new bandage. Can I help?" Surprised but grateful, Maggie nods. "I could use a hand, Jimmy. I'm trying to create a bandage that can apply consistent pressure." He studies her closely, a spark of interest lighting his eyes. "Let's give it a shot. If it works, we might just save some lives out there." Together, they spend nights perfecting the design, testing it on bandaged limbs and adjusting until it feels right. Each small success ignites their hope. Yet, with every breakthrough, the nagging fear of failure lingers. On March 15th, they prepare for their first real test. The tension in the makeshift hospital is palpable as they gather the soldiers for what they've dubbed the new bandage trial. Maggie stands before the men, her heart racing. "You're all brave to agree to this," she says, and her voice quivers slightly. "I want you to know that I believe in this method. It might just save your life." Jimmy clasps her shoulder, grounding her. "We've got this, Maggie. We're in this together." As they begin, Maggie's hands tremble with both fear and excitement. The first soldier, a young private with a deep gash on his arm, is completely unaware of the scrutiny he is under. As she applies the new bandage, she holds her breath. "Please work," she thinks. After a tense few moments, they check the bandage's effectiveness. To Maggie's astonishment, it holds firm, controlling the bleeding far better than conventional methods. "It's working!" she exclaims, a mixture of disbelief and joy flooding her. Jimmy grins, excitement bubbling beneath the surface. "Let's keep going." Maggie's heart swells with renewed hope as they continue testing. Each success becomes a stepping stone, leading her closer to proving the viability of her absurd idea. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button, she thinks, even as the stakes rise. The battlefield may be unforgiving, but so too is the spirit of innovation. Whatever it takes, she knows this journey is just beginning. March 15th, 1944, Bastogne, Belgium. The biting cold has been relentless, yet inside the makeshift hospital, a flickering lamp casts a warm glow over the chaos of medical supplies and wounded soldiers. Maggie Thompson stands resolute, flanked by her fellow medics. She clutches a bundle of her revolutionary bandages, her heart racing with both excitement and fear. "Maggie, are you sure about this?" whispers Corporal John Baker, his brow furrowed. "It's risky." Maggie meets his gaze, her determination unwavering. "If we don't try, we'll keep losing men. This could save lives." With her voice steady, she recounts the concept that had ignited her fervor: the use of a specialized bandage that could staunch severe bleeding without the need for immediate surgical intervention. "We can increase their chances of survival," she asserts, her eyes ablaze with conviction. The memory of countless lives slipping away haunts her, a driving force behind her relentless pursuit of an answer. Despite Baker's skepticism, he nods slowly, sensing the weight of her resolve. "All right, but we need to be careful." The next day, under the guise of a routine supply run, Maggie arranges to test her bandages on a handful of soldiers willing to participate. The atmosphere is thick with tension as they gather in a dimly lit tent away from prying eyes. "Listen up," Maggie addresses them, her palms clammy but her voice firm. "What I'm proposing is untested. I need you to trust me." Her sincerity pierces the skepticism hanging in the air. The men exchange glances, sensing the earnestness in her words. One by one, they step forward. "We're with you." "Maggie," says Private Davis, a young soldier with a hopeful smile. "Let's see what happens." After gathering the group, Maggie meticulously wraps the first soldier's wounded leg with her bandage, her fingers deft and precise. "You'll feel some pressure. That's normal," she explains, trying to reassure him. As she works, her mind races with possibilities, a future where soldiers might not have to die from wounds that could be treated. The first bandage is a success, and Maggie's heart swells with hope. The soldier's wound stops bleeding almost instantly, and she can hardly contain her excitement. "It's working, it's really working," she exclaims, clapping her hands with joy. As the days pass, Maggie and her small team conduct more tests, documenting every detail, successes and failures alike. Each application brings a mix of triumph and anxiety, the stakes rising higher with every procedure. Her makeshift lab feels like a sanctuary amidst the chaos, a place where innovation meets desperation. "Another one, Maggie!" Baker yells, rushing into the tent where Maggie is poring over her notes. "We've got a soldier who took shrapnel to the abdomen. He's critical." Maggie's stomach drops. They have never tested the bandage under such severe conditions. "We have to try," she responds, steeling herself. "We can't lose him." They race to the cot where the soldier lies, pale and gasping for breath. As Maggie assesses the damage, her heart pounds. This is different. This could be a turning point or a disaster. With trembling hands, she applies the bandage around his abdomen, praying it will hold. "Stay with us, soldier," she murmurs, her voice filled with compassion. "You're going to be okay." As she tightens the bandage, he winces, but then miraculously the bleeding begins to slow. "It's working," Maggie shouts, a wave of relief washing over her. Baker, who had been anxiously watching, allows himself a cautious grin. Days of testing continue, the team growing more confident in their methods. Each success brings renewed energy, and the atmosphere in the tent shifts from desperation to hope. Maggie records data meticulously, while the soldier's gratitude fuels her spirit. "Your bandages saved my life. Nurse Thompson," a soldier says, his voice barely above a whisper. "I owe you everything." But with every victory comes the gnawing fear of discovery. They are operating outside military protocols, and the risk of being reprimanded weighs heavily on Maggie's heart. "What if they shut us down?" she confides to Baker one night, her voice tinged with anxiety. "If it comes to that, we'll fight," he assures her. "You've already made a difference. We have to keep going." As tension mounts, Maggie decides to conduct one final test, a larger-scale simulation involving multiple injuries, mimicking real combat conditions. This time, she invites a few trusted officers to observe, hoping to convince them of her method's potential. March 25, 1944. In the adjacent field, a mock battle is staged. Soldiers simulate injuries under the watchful eye of military officials. Maggie stands at the forefront, directing the application of her bandages with fierce determination. "Ready? Go!" she yells, adrenaline surging through her veins. The chaotic scene unfolds and Maggie's team jumps into action, applying bandages to the wounded while documenting every detail. With each successful application, her confidence rises. As the final soldier is treated, the officials murmur among themselves, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. Lieutenant Colonel Harris, a commanding figure, approaches. "Your methods, they're unconventional," he admits, "but I cannot deny the results." Maggie's heart soars. If we can implement this across the board, we can save thousands. It's not just about bandages, it's about saving lives. The colonel contemplates her words, his brow furrowing in thought. "We'll need more data, but I'll support a larger-scale trial." Maggie's breath hitches. This is their breakthrough. "Thank you, sir. You won't regret it." In the days that follow, word spreads about Maggie's bandage method. Soldiers whisper of her innovative approach, and the once dim tent is now filled with energy and hope. The camaraderie strengthens among the medics, united by a shared purpose and belief in Maggie's vision. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. Maggie laughs, the sound buoyant amidst the camaraderie. Her determination, once dismissed as absurd, now carries weight. The dawning realization settles in. They are not just healing wounds, they are shaping the fate of countless lives. As Maggie reflects on her journey, she is filled with gratitude. She may be a nurse in the midst of war, but her spirit has ignited a flame of hope that will light the path forward. March 16th, 1944. Bastogne, Belgium. The biting cold seeps into the skin, but the atmosphere inside the makeshift military tent is charged with intensity. Rows of men in military uniforms sit stiffly against the canvas walls, their faces a mix of skepticism and curiosity. At the front, the high-ranking officers exchange glances, waiting for the next speaker. Among them is Colonel James Hargrove, a man whose reputation for cautious pragmatism precedes him. Maggie stands at the center, her heart racing as she grips her notes tightly. The buzz of chatter fades as she steps forward. "Thank you for allowing me to present, gentlemen." Her voice, though steady, carries an undercurrent of nerves. "I believe my bandaging technique can significantly reduce battlefield deaths from hemorrhage." A murmur ripples through the room. Major Thomas Green, a stout man with a furrowed brow, leans forward. "Nurse Thompson, with all due respect, this is the military. We don't have time for experimental methods. Traditional techniques serve us well enough." Maggie meets his gaze, unflinching. "But traditional methods are failing us, Major. In the last offensive, we lost over 8,000 men due to preventable bleeding. My technique could change that." As Colonel Hargrove's eyes narrow. "How so?" His tone is skeptical, yet there's a flicker of intrigue. Maggie takes a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I've developed a method that uses a pressure bandage that can be applied quickly under combat conditions. It stabilizes wounds and can be done with minimal training. I've seen the impact firsthand." Another officer, Captain Richard Lang, speaks up. "And what proof do you have? Anecdotes are not enough to warrant a change in protocol." "Proof is coming, sir." Maggie's resolve hardens. "But we need to act now. The next offensive is imminent. If we don't test this, we are choosing to let men die." Silence envelops the tent. The officers exchange whispered deliberations, the gravity of her words weighing heavily in the air. Colonel Hargrove nods slowly, contemplating. "You have one chance, Nurse Thompson. A field test with actual casualties." "I won't let you down, Colonel," she replies, her heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. The next day, March 17th, the battlefield outside Bastogne is alive with the sounds of gunfire and chaos. Maggie stands with her fellow medics amidst the cacophony. The sun barely breaks through the thick clouds, casting a gray pallor over the scene. The air is thick with the smell of gunpowder and desperation. As the first casualties are brought in, Maggie works swiftly, her hands trembling but steady. The pressure bandages she fashioned are ready. She applies one to a soldier's shattered leg, her voice calm amidst the chaos. "Stay with me, soldier. You're going to be okay." She exchanges glances with her fellow medics, who were initially skeptical, but now watch intently, their faith in her growing with each application. A sergeant yells for help, and Maggie rushes to assist, her earlier doubts overshadowed by the reality of saving lives. Hours stretch into an eternity. They face setbacks. A bandage slips here, a panic there, but each success fuels Maggie's resolve. A soldier, previously losing consciousness, is stabilized. Maggie feels a flicker of hope in her heart. Finally, as the day draws to a close, the last of the wounded is treated. Exhausted yet exhilarated, Maggie gathers the medics around her. "We did it," she breathes, the weight of the day lifting. "We saved lives today." Weeks pass, and the results of the field test are compiled. The numbers are staggering. Colonel Hargrove stands before the gathered officers once more, the tension palpable in the air. Reports indicate a significant decrease in fatalities, losses reduced by 85% in the units applying Nurse Thompson's method. The room erupts in murmurs of disbelief and admiration. Major Green's expression shifts from skepticism to reluctant respect. "It seems, Nurse Thompson, you've proven your point." Maggie blushes, overwhelmed by the sudden recognition. "I only did what needed to be done," she replies modestly, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and humility. As the officers continue their discussions about implementing her technique army-wide, Maggie feels a surge of adrenaline. This is her moment. Her idea is not just accepted, it is celebrated. She can't help but smile as Colonel Hargrove gestures for her to join him at the front. "Let it be known," he announces, "that sometimes the most unlikely ideas can lead to the greatest victories. Nurse Thompson, your innovation has paved the way for a new standard in battlefield medicine." As applause echoes through the tent, Maggie glances around, seeing the faces of her fellow medics, her allies, lighting up with hope and respect. But as the applause fades, the weight of the reality sets back in. The war continues, and the losses will mount again. The battle is not over. This victory is merely a step forward. Yet for the first time, there's a glimmer of hope that things can change for the better. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. She thinks to herself, smiling at the irony of her own words as she embraces her newfound purpose. Maggie looks out of the tent, the distant sounds of battle still echoing beneath the smoke. It's a moment of catharsis, a realization that her work, her courage, and her innovation matter. The war rages on, but now there's a flicker of humanity shining through the darkness, one that refuses to be extinguished. She whispers to herself, "We will save more lives. This is just the beginning." March 15th, 1944. Antwerp, Belgium. The atmosphere inside the military hospital is tense, the air thick with unspoken fears and whispered doubts. Rows of officers sit stiffly, their uniforms crisp, their faces a mask of skepticism. At the head of the table stands Colonel Edward Hargrove, a seasoned leader known for his unwavering adherence to protocol and tradition. The wooden table before him is strewn with papers, charts, and the blood-stained remnants of failed medical practices. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, his voice commanding yet weary, "we are gathered here to discuss the recent proposal from Nurse Margaret Thompson regarding her innovative bandage method." He glances at Maggie, who stands at the side of the room, fingers nervously fidgeting with the edges of her uniform. "Let's be frank," Hargrove continues. "This is a war. We have protocols for a reason. We can't afford to gamble with untested ideas." His eyes narrow, searching the faces around him. "We've lost too many men already. We need solutions grounded in proven science." "Colonel," Maggie interjects, her voice steady despite the quaking of her heart, "I understand the skepticism, but what I've seen in the field, what I've witnessed with my own eyes, proves that conventional methods are failing us. We need to adapt. My approach isn't just a theory, it's born from necessity." "Necessity?" scoffs Major Callahan, a burly man with a reputation for his no-nonsense attitude. "You're proposing we use a bandage that hasn't even been evaluated in clinical trials. That's absurd. It's irresponsible and dangerous." Maggie takes a deep breath, the weight of their disapproval pressing down on her. Every day, we lose soldiers to infections that could be mitigated. My method could significantly reduce infection rates. Just give me the chance to prove it. Let's not get carried away, Hargrove counters, his voice lowering as he leans forward. What data do you have to support this? Anecdotes from the battlefield don't equate to evidence. Maggie's resolve hardens. I can provide records of my patients, those who survived because of the bandage. The soldiers are suffering, and we have the opportunity to change that. Please allow me to conduct a live test, in real combat conditions. The room falls silent, the tension palpable. Hargrove studies Maggie, his gaze unwavering. She can feel the weight of the decision resting squarely on his shoulders. This isn't just about you, Nurse Thompson. It's about the lives of those men out there. Exactly, she replies, her voice a whisper, but filled with fierce determination. We owe it to them to try. After a long pause, Hargrove sighs deeply. Fine. You'll have one chance, but I can't assure you that the higher command will support this. You'll be on your own. Maggie nods, overwhelmed with a mix of relief and trepidation. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Days pass before the opportunity arrives. March 20th, 1944. The front lines in the Ardennes are raw and chaotic, the sounds of gunfire and distant explosions echoing in the frigid air. Maggie stands with a small group of medics, her heart racing as they prepare for what could be the turning point of her career. As they set to work, a convoy of injured soldiers arrives, faces pale and bodies trembling with shock. Each life before her is a story, a future hanging in the balance. Stay focused, she reminds her team, her voice steady. Remember the plan. The first soldier is brought in, a young man with a gruesome wound on his thigh. Maggie quickly assesses the damage, her hands moving with purpose as she applies her bandage, the one she had designed to reduce infection and promote healing. You're going to be okay, she murmurs, meeting his frightened gaze. Hours pass, and the makeshift triage center becomes a whirlwind of activity. Maggie feels the adrenaline coursing through her veins, her method being tested in real time. She treats one soldier after another, each application of her bandage a small act of defiance against the tide of despair. Then, amid the chaos, the first positive signs emerge. Soldiers who would have succumbed to their wounds are responding. Maggie watches, astonished, as their conditions stabilize. She remembers the faces of those she lost before, those who had been denied even a chance to heal. "Major, look!" one of her colleagues exclaims, pointing to the chart. The infection rates are dropping significantly among those treated with Maggie's bandages. Her heart races. Hope flickers in the eyes of her team. They exchange glances, a quiet understanding passing between them. This could be it, the validation they had all longed for. Later that night, exhausted but exhilarated, Maggie gathers with her team. They share coffee, their spirits lifted as they recount the day's triumphs. "You did it, Maggie," one medic says, clapping her on the back. "You proved them wrong." But Maggie knows this is just the beginning. The real test lies ahead, where she must convince the higher command of the effectiveness of her method. She gathers her notes, documenting every detail, every statistic, the lives saved, the infections prevented. March 25th, 1944. The meeting is set once again in the stark confines of the military hospital. Hargrove takes his seat at the head of the table, flanked by other high-ranking officers. The weight of their gazes is unrelenting as Maggie presents her findings. "Colonel," she begins, her voice steady, "the results speak for themselves. We've recorded an 85% reduction in infection rates among soldiers treated with my bandage method." Skepticism still lingers in the room. "But we need more than just numbers, Nurse Thompson," Hargrove replies, his brow furrowed in thought. "We need rigorous clinical trials." "I understand," she responds passionately. "But think of the lives we can save now, today. The war isn't waiting for formalities. Soldiers are dying while we debate. Let's not allow bureaucracy to steal hope." For a moment, silence reigns. Then, a quiet murmur spreads through the room as officers exchange glances. Hargrove's expression shifts. a flicker of realization passing through his eyes. "Very well, Nurse Thompson. You have our permission to proceed with a larger-scale implementation of your method." As the meeting adjourns, Maggie's heart swells with a mixture of triumph and disbelief. She had faced the skepticism of war-hardened men and emerged victorious. The road ahead is still fraught with uncertainty, but she knows that every soldier treated with her bandage is a step toward change. In the days that follow, as the war rages on, Maggie's bandage method is put into wider practice. Each soldier wrapped in her creation is not just a number. They are lives reclaimed, futures preserved. The war may be brutal and unforgiving, but amidst the chaos, humanity finds a way to shine through. As she walks through the medical tent, the sounds of laughter and camaraderie touch her ears, a stark contrast to the battlefield outside. She sees the faces of men recovering, hope rekindled. Maggie knows that her fight is far from over, but with each life she saves, she reaffirms her belief in the power of innovation. Innovation doesn't seek permission. It forges its own path with courage and conviction. And in that moment, surrounded by the resilient spirit of those she serves, Maggie understands that she has become a part of something larger, a force of change in a world in desperate need of healing. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world? Comment below. March 15th, 1945, London, England. The city is a mosaic of resilience and renewal, banners of hope fluttering in the crisp spring breeze. The war is not yet over, but the echoes of Maggie Thompson's extraordinary contribution resonate in the hearts of those who served alongside her. An ember of change ignited by her audacious bandage method has begun to reshape military medical practices globally. Maggie sits at a small, wooden table in a bustling cafe, a stark contrast to the battle-scarred surroundings she left behind in Bastogne. Her once-worn uniform is replaced by a simple dress, yet the scars of war linger deep within her. She absent-mindedly stirs her tea, her mind traversing the memories of the front lines, chaos interspersed with moments of clarity and determination. "Did you hear about the latest report?" A voice pulls her from her reverie. It's Lieutenant Ava Reynolds, a fellow nurse and close friend. The bandage method is reducing combat deaths by nearly 85%. Maggie's eyes widen, a mix of pride and disbelief washing over her. "I never thought it would reach this level. We were just trying to save lives." As news of Maggie's innovative approach spreads, medical corps around the world begin to adopt her techniques. Soldiers are wrapped in layers of gauze designed to staunch bleeding rapidly, utilizing her makeshift materials. Hospitals transformed into bustling centers of hope rather than despair. The war might be cruel, but Maggie's methods breathe life into a beleaguered medical system, often deemed incapable of handling the ever-increasing tide of casualties. Despite the accolades, Maggie remains humble. "I just did what I had to do," she often tells others, an echo of her own inner dialogue as she recalls the faces of the men and women she fought to save. Each life she preserved becomes a part of her, binding her to the essence of humanity amidst the brutality of conflict. Meanwhile, the higher echelons of military authority begin taking notice. On April 1st, a formal meeting convenes in a grand hall in Washington, D.C., where senior officers weigh the significance of Maggie's method. The air is thick with skepticism. Commander Harrington stands tall, arms crossed, his brow furrowed. "We cannot rely on the whims of a single nurse, regardless of her success in the field. This is war, not a nurse's playbook." Maggie's heart pounds as she remembers the faces of the men who depended on her. This is not just her fight, it's theirs. She stands, the sound of her chair scraping against the floor drawing attention. "With all due respect, sir, it's not whimsy, it's survival. My method works. Soldiers are alive today because of it." Her voice is steady, yet tinged with an emotional weight. The room exchanges glances, uncertainty creeping in. A few officers silently nod, acknowledging her conviction. As the meeting progresses, data is presented. Combat deaths have indeed decreased dramatically in areas employing her method. It becomes clear, Maggie is not merely a nurse. She is a pioneer whose courage has reshaped military medicine. On the front lines, Maggie's method continues to save lives. As weeks blend into months, the tide of war shifts. In April 1945, the Allied forces gain ground, and the numbers of saved soldiers swell. The first tangible results of Maggie's contributions reach every corner of the battlefront. Yet, as the war nears its end, Maggie grapples with an internal conflict. Her identity has become intertwined with her role as a caretaker, and the notion of returning to a civilian life feels daunting. She often wonders, who will remember the little nurse from Bastogne once the guns fall silent? In the quiet moments of the night, when the moonlight bathes her barracks, Maggie reflects on the fragile line between life and death. The faces of those she lost haunt her, yet she finds solace in the lives she saved. "I did not invent a cure. I simply found a way to care," she whispers to herself, a mantra of humility amid the accolades. As the war officially ends in May 1945, Maggie finds herself honored in a ceremony at Buckingham Palace. It is a day brightened with celebration, yet shaded with grief. The joy of victory is tinged with the losses etched in her heart. During the ceremony, she stands alongside generals and dignitaries, receiving a medal for bravery and innovation. The applause surrounds her, yet she feels distant, aware of the price that was paid. Years pass, and Maggie's life settles into a rhythm that feels both foreign and familiar. She opens a small clinic in her hometown, a sanctuary for those seeking healing. The war may have left her with scars, but it has also gifted her with profound wisdom. Innovation doesn't need credentials. It needs courage, she often tells her patients. As she works with wounded veterans, she realizes that her legacy is not in the recognition or the medals, but in the lives she touched. One afternoon, a young soldier enters her clinic, an echo of her past self. "I'm scared," he admits, his voice trembling. Maggie kneels beside him, warmth emanating from her presence. "You're brave for seeking help. Let's work together," she replies, knowing that healing transcends the physical. It is about connection, compassion, and the audacity to care. On the wall of her clinic, a handwritten note hangs, a reminder of her journey. What we do in life echoes in eternity. It is a tribute to every soldier who fought, every nurse who cared, and every person who dared to hope. In her quiet moments, she pens letters to the families of the fallen, sharing stories of their bravery. "Every life mattered," she writes, each word an affirmation that no one is truly forgotten. Years later, standing in the midst of a bustling clinic filled with laughter and healing, Maggie reflects on the life she lived. The war, with all its destruction, unveiled her purpose. "What impossible ideas do you think could change the world?" she muses, prompting her patients to dare to dream. As she gazes out the window, she recognizes the essence of humanity in every face that passes by. Life is fragile, but hope is indestructible. The memory of those who fought and fell inspires her to carry the flame of innovation and compassion. Maggie Thompson's story teaches us that in the darkest of times, it takes courage to care, to innovate, and to embrace the impossible. In the heart of war, she found her calling, reminding all that true legacy lies in the love we share and the lives we save. And so, the war may have ended, but the battle for empathy and courage continues. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world? Comment below.